Welcome to Pure Beast Fitness, where I keep health and fitness simple. Today I'm going to be talking about reducing your sodium intake and pretty much the reasons why. The reason why I'm doing this video is because when I get into discussions about reducing your sodium intake, there's always somebody chiming in talking about your body needs sodium. You need to have sodium in order to function, for your heart to function, which I agree with. I don't think you should go zero sodium. But I came across some chart that, raised some concern, and I feel like it would kind of back my reason for encouraging people to reduce their sodium intake. And I just came across this chart by actually looking up for information on a totally different topic. I got them from different places. One of them is from the UK. Another one was a survey done in, I think, in New York or New York City. And another one is from the CDC. What's important is actually the numbers on the chart, right? So I guess so. Let's look at black people, right? Check out the numbers. Well, not the numbers per se, but check out the comparison, right? And this one, black Caribbean people, numbers is fairly high in terms of percent of the population with hypertension, right? We're higher than other groups, right? We're higher than the Pakistani, Indian, whites, white British. We're the highest. So check out this chart. The red stands for, black folks. And this chart is showing the age at which they were diagnosed for hypertension. So we have at age 30 and under, right? We lead in the diagnosis. In the 40 and under, same thing for 50 and under. Let's check out this next chart. We are right here. Check out these numbers, right? I would say Dominicans are black, but you all know they'll get offended. But their numbers is high too. The numbers is high across all charts as it pertains to black people. So when I talk about reducing the sodium, the last thing anybody should be chiming in on is talking about sodium being essential for function, because that's a given. We know that. So it's actually funny because considering how high our numbers are, when Plain Jane brings her unseasoned chicken to the potluck, we're like the first to start joking and kikiking and cackling about it. I say reduce your sodium. Somebody else said we need sodium. Keep your sodium high. Let's find out what the recommendations are for sodium sinks. I say reduce, somebody else said to increase. Here's a recommendation by the American Heart Association. They say Americans consume more than 3,400 milligrams of sodium each day on average. Their recommendation is that we actually consume 2,300 milligrams each day. If after you do your calculation and you look on the food label and you do your tally for the whole day and you realize your consumption is well over the 2,300 milligram, I would say you could benefit from the tips and advice that I would have in this video. What happens if your sodium consumption is too high, right? This blood pressure, increase, higher risk for heart disease, and of course, strokes. Outside of an increase in your risk for cardiovascular disease, if you're somebody who is trying to monitor your physique, a high sodium diet would actually cause you to gain weight. The sodium causes your body to retain water. And if you're trying to monitor your physique, your body is going to appear less chiseled as you would like it to be. If you look at people who do fitness photo shoots, as well as bodybuilders, competitors, if you spoke with them and you asked them about their diet leading up to a photo shoot or a competition, a lot of them would tell you that their sodium consumption is actually reduced, and they try their best to limit or monitor their sodium consumption for the sole purpose of having a more chiseled physique when they're on stage. A lot of times if you're consuming, foods that are high in sodium, that's the reason why you can't get further down. So you would end up doing more cardio, you end up losing a lot of your shape, a lot of your tone, you end up looking skinny and scrawny, but you still don't achieve that chisel look. So this chart represents where the sodium in foods come from, right? The red area is, this is what, 71% comes from processed foods or restaurant food. The 40% naturally occurring, we leave that alone. 5% is added at the table, that's actually not too bad. 6% is home cook preparation. I feel like that's kind of low, for certain people, black people. When we talk about processed foods and canned foods, these would be like those already seasoned meat, Lunchables. It will be your Dorito chips, your bread, I guess, your basically anything that, not anything, but most things that comes in a package. If you read the side of the label, if you read the nutritional label, if you read the nutritional label, you're going to find some level of sodium in it. This is why it's actually hard to completely eliminate sodium. This is actually an easy fix. You simply go to the restaurant and tell them you have high blood pressure, so you gotta keep your sodium intake down. Ask them to not use anything that has sodium in it. Don't say salt. Don't use anything that has sodium, because not all salt has sodium in it. For processed foods, obviously just stay away from processed food. The packaged alternatives to most food is going to have a higher amount of sodium, because that's what's used to preserve it. So if you look at, let's say you look at sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes in a can is going to have a drastically higher amount of sodium than sweet potatoes that's not preserved. That goes for pretty much all your canned vegetables versus your non-canned vegetables. The one in the can is always going to be higher than the ones that are not in the can. That liquid in there, yeah, that's that. Other foods that you would want to avoid is the all-purpose seasoning. Those seasoning has a lot of sodium on the side of it, and if you think about how much we actually cook at home, some of us, those numbers add up. We're eating stuff from the can. On top of that, we're adding these complete seasoning or all-purpose seasoning that has like a lot of sodium in it as just, I guess that's the flavor. I don't even know why they have that ungodly amount of sodium in some of these seasonings that we have. You could actually use a sodium-free seasoning. Sodium-free season, just to give an example, would be, I think, Mrs. Dash. There's, I want to believe Goya makes a sodium-free season also. I used to make my own seasoning by buying the separate seasoning, like the individual seasoning, and mixing it into a container and just leaving out the salt until maybe like I get to the table. Like the chart said, only 5% is really added at the table. So I would just mix my own seasoning up, add my dill weed, all my turmeric, I add paprika, you know, your chili powder, mix that all in one jar, and that's your seasoning right there. If you feel like your food might need some more salt to get that zing, maybe at the table you can add like a dash of salt, which is not bad compared to like if you was using a complete seasoning, which has a lot of sodium in it on top of basically cooking something that came out the can. Once you're cooking something that came out the can and you're adding that complete seasoning to it, you're loading it up with sodium. The other thing that I do to keep my sodium intake down is I use salt alternative. Now, if you going to use salt alternatives, you have to be very careful because too much of it could actually be harmful for you. The one that I typically use is Morton's potassium salt. So it's salt with potassium, but there is no sodium in it. So it's like potassium, probably potassium chloride or something like that. The benefit of that is your food still has like that salt taste, slight metallic, but it tastes just like salt, but you're not consuming the sodium. They usually sell those bottles in small amounts, so it's not something that you could use when you're cooking like a big pot of food. So it's not something you're gonna mix and add like a whole bunch of like a pot and end up stirring it, and it's not something you would pour into your own seasoning if you was making your own. You don't mix it with other stuff. You simply add a dash to it while you're at the dinner table eating whatever it is you're eating. Anything more than that could be fatal. If you're on blood pressure, high blood pressure medication, you want to check with your doctors too, because I want to believe the potassium could reduce your blood pressure even more. That's all the suggestions I have for now. But the takeaway from this is you need to make sure that you're cooking your own food. That will help you avoid the process, avoid the restaurants and canned product. You need to make sure that you're not using a lot of these complete seasoning or all-purpose seasoning that has sodium in them. And you need to find a way to preserve your food that doesn't involve adding salt. So one way you could preserve your food would be putting it in the refrigerator, Ziploc, putting it in a Ziploc bag. I know it sounds simple, but it goes a long way. Put it in the Tupperware containers. If you feel like I missed anything, feel free to add it to the video. Otherwise, tune in for the next one. Thanks for watching.